Hey soldiers, we're about to observe a very important economic lesson from one of the wealthiest families in America. Now, once you watch what I'm about to show you, we'll come back on the other side and talk about it. But I want you to understand, as you watch this, this is something you can do as well. We founded this channel on observing the wealthy, taking a look at the things they are doing, taking a look at the things they're saying, taking a look at the things they're not doing in order to be able to emulate those things at our socioeconomic level in order to build wealth, especially generational wealth. Now, what you're about to see is a very powerful method of doing that. We've talked about it on the channel before, but I think that once you see it having been built in action, things are going to click for you. All right, synapses are going to connect and you're going to be able to see how this is possible in your life. Now, let me preface this by saying, because we're going to be hearing from one of the presidential candidates, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Let me say this is not an endorsement for RFK. However, it's not an endorsement for his presidential candidacy, but it is an endorsement for what he's exhibiting. Okay, that is the lesson that we're going to look into. On the other side, we're going to talk about how to implement that. Before we get into it, go ahead, hit the thumbs up now. I know you're going to like the video, so hit the thumbs up. Help me with the algorithm. Let's help spread this message. This is vitally important. We're going to be talking about the acquisition of an incredible asset that has a potential to transform your family for generations to come. Transform the organizations you care about for generations to come. You put this piece together with some of the other things that we've observed the wealthy do, and yes, you too can have this, especially now when we've got a rapidly evolving global economy. This is what we need to return to. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe, enlist, become a soldier of finance. This is where you want to be, because as this economy evolves, we are tracking it very closely. You're not going to get caught without a seat once this music stops if you're watching this channel. So hit subscribe, thumbs up, and also take a look at that join button. If you haven't become a member, take a look at that. We've got something to offer there that's very special. Now, here we go.
Just tell you how grateful I am for your generosity and for your friendship. I'm here at my house on Cape Cod and Hyannisport, and behind me is my grandfather's house. This is the Kennedy compound. My grandfather bought that house in 1928. He was living in Boston, but he was a scratch golfer, but he couldn't play golf. They wouldn't let Catholics on the golf courses in Cohasset or the northern towns. And he came down here because there's a golf course here that was built by an Irishman named Lawrence O'Brien. And so they, of course, let Catholics on. My father was the first of his children, was the seventh of his children, but the first one to get married. So all the 9 children were raised in that house. My father was the first one to get his own house, and that's it there. And then my uncle, President Kennedy, owned this house here, and my uncle Steve Smith owned the house right there attached to the compound. When I was a kid, every Friday, the summer White House was here, and every Friday, 3 helicopters would land right there next to the beach near the football field. And my uncle would get out, President Kennedy, with my Uncle Teddy, who was in the Senate beginning in 1962. My Uncle Steve Smith, who was the Chief of Staff in the White House. My Uncle Sarge Shriver, who was at the head of the Peace Corps. And my father, who was Attorney General. They'd all get out of those 3 helicopters. And then we would spend the weekends here. On the election eve in 1960, the election headquarters was my father's house. And Louis Harris, the pollster, was there, and he was set up on the 2nd floor in my bedroom. And my Uncle Jack, around 1 or 2 in the morning, he was losing the election. And California returns hadn't come in like that. And he went home. He walked back in the yard. He walked into his house and he went to sleep. And the next morning, my Aunt Jackie sent Caroline in, who I think was 3 years old at that time. And she said to him, he lived in this bedroom right here, that picture window. And Caroline woke him up and said, "Good morning, Mr. President." And that was the first he knew that he'd been elected. And then he gave that willow tree there. He gave his first press conference as president-elect under that tree. And the Secret Service that afternoon brought in a trailer. And this was the baseball field where we played baseball every day. My 29 cousins here. And all the other kids in this town. And so for the next 3 years, we were living in this magical situation in the middle of the summer White House with, family, really big, loving family, filled with great, great kids. And, I had a magical childhood that I'm very, very grateful for. So that's kind of a little part of my history. It's the history that's brought me to this point in part today, and I'm really happy for the chance to share it with you. And I want to thank you all again.
All right, so what did he show us? This is one of America's most influential, more so in previous generations than now, but also still a family that has a combined net worth of well over $1 billion. A family that you can go to the family office and get financing to start a business, to buy a property, all right? They've arranged that. That started with Joe Kennedy back in the day. Now, what did he show you? He showed you the value of multi-generational living, okay? I've said it before on the channel. When immigration started to hit Baltimore City and you found a lot of Hispanics cohabitating the same property, a lot of people laughed at that, ridiculed them. And I would always say, hey, wait a minute, they're splitting the bills. They're pooling their resources. And you would see in several cases where they did that for a few years, several of them branched out, started businesses, and then, that income started to perpetuate. It was not a laughing matter. It was very serious. I think it was laughed at by some, not many, by some. They didn't understand the fact that multi-generational households are key to being able to build true wealth in this world. If you look back, there was a TV show back in the 80s called Dallas. Had a character on there by the name of J.R. Ewing. This was one of the most popular shows of the 1980s. And the show profiled the family. They were oil barons down in Dallas, Texas. They owned an oil company. They were multimillionaires many times over back then in the 80s, okay? So that money was really something back then, okay? But they all lived in the same house. They lived on a ranch. And the CEO of the company, the founder of the company, which was the father lived there. The sons lived there. And then, as the show went on, the grandchildren also lived there. They had a spin-off sequel type thing back in the 2010s, and the grandchildren were still living there. And one of them had a baby, and they lived there. So the point of the matter is, and they said that this show was very popular in Eastern Europe. And the reason it was very popular is because a lot of Eastern European families could relate to a multi-generational household, okay? We need to get back to that. There's nothing wrong with individualism. However, in America, commercialism, conspicuous consumerism has gotten us away from doing things that are in our financial best interest. Consumerism typically coincides with the acquisition of debt, all right? The acquisition of liabilities. What we want to be in a position to do is not only acquire assets, but also have our kids, our grandkids, nieces, nephews, whatever, aunts, uncles, build wealth too. We want to be in a position like the Kennedys, where we're looking at the world and we're saying we need to set up a structure whereby we sidestep, or to the furthest extent that we can, sidestep traditional banks. Okay, we need to set up financing for our own family. People, this is possible. And one of the ways you can do that is by having a family compound. Now, will your compound be, or will my compound be, seaside? Probably not. All right. That's out of my reach financially. I don't mind admitting that, what they've got. And remember, that fortune, the Kennedy fortune, started its construction back in the 1910s, okay, 1920s, that era. So it's been going for just over 100 years now. So while I may not be able to afford the seaside compound spread out like the Kennedys have, I can afford a few acres maybe down in the Carolinas, or I don't know what part of the country you live in. I don't know if you're in this country. If you are in a country where you can buy land like that, in a, off the beaten path, and arable land where you can plant something, where you can put up structures where you and your family can live. And I'm not saying they have to live there full time. All right. Maybe it's a thing where this is just a place where folk can come. All right. If they are, say, going to college and they want to not have to pay rent while they're doing that. If they, of course, they have to be going to college in that area. But you see the potential, I'm sure. All right. So multi-generational households are going to give you not only an opportunity to pool your resources, but think about the appreciation of that land. All right. So what that father did, Joe Kennedy, is he said to his sons, hey, son, he said to his son, John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, hey, this is my land. You could put up a house on this land. And I'm sure he said to them, and you could pay me mortgage. And that mortgage went into that family pocket of family bank of money. All right. And it's still working on behalf of that family. Now, the elephant in the room is this. You might not come from a family that you care to live next door to. That's always a possibility. What do you do in that situation? Well, if there are like-minded people in your family, maybe children, parents, okay, then, okay, maybe you can or can't do that. But to the extent that you can still buy land, all right, maybe you'll have a better relationship with your grandchildren. Who knows? But they're not making any more of it. And you see that not having to, raising a family and not having to worry about where they're going to live. If you love your family like I do mine, then this is ideal. Okay. And plus, it looks like Kennedy's got enough room to spread out when they get sick of each other. He can go over here and they can go over there. And they probably are able to avoid seeing each other for a day or two. People get tired of one another. But that's the lesson I want you to take from that, is that multi-generational living is going to give you the opportunity to pool resources, but it's also going to give you the opportunity to allow you to pool assets and sit back and have everybody benefit from the appreciation of those assets. Imagine what the equity on that property is in comparison to what they bought it for. All right. Imagine. And they're just sitting there on it. And I like somebody asked me in the comments, and it's a good question, because I always say, if you can avoid it, don't sell assets. Of course, you can leverage assets, but don't sell them. Keep them in a position where they are working for you as long as you can, and then turn them over to family. Prevent that family member from having to start that process all over again, right? Another thing that the Kennedys use, another tool that they use, and we've talked about this on the channel before, and we'll talk about it again. But another tool that they use to finance this family, the endeavors that they want to participate in, okay, is insurance. Okay, another well-kept secret for whatever reason. Put your money in a bank. Get less than 1% return from it. That's it. Do that. Okay. No. There are places where you can get a better return on your money, get it tax advantaged, and also be able to access that money. Tax advantaged. All right? Bank's not going to do that for you. The Kennedys, okay, the Rockefellers, but the Carnegies. We're talking about the Kennedys right now. The Clintons, the Bushes. The Kennedys, though, and those other families do use insurance. The Bushes have a compound. All right? It's not about whether we like these people personally or we like their politics. We are looking at one aspect of their behavior, and that is their wealth building characteristics. The Bushes have a compound in Kennebunkport, Maine. They also have plenty of property down in Texas and other places in the world as well. Build yourself a compound. Figure out where you want it to be. Scout out some land. We're going to have more on this. Start thinking in that direction. All right, guys. I'll talk to you soon.